everyone, Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5 Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
Hello, Rush Nation. This is the second attempt. I already uploaded this. I already put this up online, and then people couldn't hear the audio. So we go again. I don't know what happened because the audio file, when I played it and edited it, was fine. But then it just seems to be the audio is now completely corrupted or lost. I don't know what happened. Anyway, it's fine. We're going to do this again. So I'm going to give it the same energy. It'll probably be better second time round. So here we go. Here to talk about all things waiver wire. Week 2 already cooking as we look at this. And you've got to think we're 1/17th of the way there to winning a fantasy title. What I would say is not a particularly great waiver wire week. I do think there is going to be some players worth looking at, but also it's just really key to point out that actually let's not panic, stay the course. That's the message I gave to the Patreons this morning, is stay the course. Stick with it. And speaking of Patrons, you can join our Patreon conversation. Just hit the link below. You can subscribe. I did a review of all the 15 games, not last night's game, yesterday. That's there for free for everyone, but also you can join for just a couple of bucks, couple of pounds a month, and you're able to get all the great content I record. I've just done a session on advanced stats and what that kind of means and situations to look out for and what that's going to mean moving forward. So really interesting stuff over there. I'm going to be doing more Patreon casts, really diving into the deep analytics and wider strategy play. So well worth your money, but also you can join the Discord. I'll post some of that stuff in the Discord as well to keep the conversation going. So do have a look in there. Right, let's have a look at waiver wire targets for week 1, and I'm going to do this by position as per usual. Best way to do it, easiest way to do it. So I'm going to keep you all busy and review our waiver wire ads for week 1 or for week 2, sorry. So what I would say, just looking into this, there's not, as I said already, not loads of great choice. So I would say there's a couple of opportunities here, but I'm going to go into sort of the mainstream, and then I'll have a couple of really like deep plays that you can kind of explore as well and look at in more detail as well, because there's a couple of really interesting pieces in there. Not tons, but there is a little bit for those much deeper leagues. Let's start first off with the quarterback position. I would say none of these players are worth more than $1 a fab, because especially the 1 QB league. In a Superflex league, it might be a little bit different. They are owned what they're owned for a reason. We'll start with Matt Stafford, 29% owned. He's definitely my top waiver wire pick. We know what he can do. We know he's a top 15 fantasy quarterback if he stays healthy. The concern is the injuries, and that's why late on he wasn't being drafted, because those injury concerns were already out in the ether. But he looked healthy, he looked fit. That's all that really matters for me. He's the top waiver wire pick at quarterback. Followed next by Geno Smith. Geno Smith is going to put up a good amount of yards. He's going to be on pace to put up a decent amount of yards, but the lack of production. So he's going to be a low-end QB option. Fine for Superflex. Not sure I'd have him in a 1 QB league. Again, I'm probably not spending anything on him. I'd like to think I could get him for $0, but in a Superflex league, you might have to spend $1 or $2 to get him in the door. The other players I would look at, Michael Penix Jr., I think he looked good with a very limited supporting cast. I would say that there was a lack of penetration. There were some silly mistakes, but at 20% owned, he's an interesting player to really keep an eye on. Probably would look to have him over Geno Smith. He is 1% owned. He's worth $1 fab in those Superflex leagues if he's available. I doubt he is, though. But in a 1 QB league, maybe one's a star, but maybe not one to add. The one to also keep, and then Daniel Jones at 8% owned. He's a player who I think of all of these probably has a good ceiling outside of Stafford. I think he can reach the ethers of top 15, but he only came off playing Miami. We have to be a little bit conscious of that. I do think there's some significant upside to taking him, certainly more than Geno Smith, certainly more than Michael Penix Jr. how well does that hold up? But I have some faith and confidence in Shane Steichen. He's worth in a Superflex league, he's worth $5. In a non-Superflex league, he's worth $1 at most. And then Jackson Dart is one to keep an eye on in a Superflex league. He's a must-add. You can add him for a couple of dollars. There's all this rumors and talk that he could be ascending into the job. I think the bottom line is the Giants aren't going to be very good this year, and as a result of that, Jackson Dart is going to probably get some playing time sooner rather than later. Do I think that's wise? No. Do I think that I believe all the stories that the ball is going to go and ask ownership? I don't think ownership are involved. I don't think they're overarching like other organizations like David Tepper and Carolina and the team over at Cleveland Browns. I don't think you're going to have that kind of ownership interference there, but I do think that there is something in the noise. There's no smoke without fire. And if this team's bad, they have to see what they've got in Jackson Dart. They've got picks to play with next year to see what they can do. So they need to kind of review if he's the future. The future might come sooner because they look really bad on offense. Looking at the running back options, and you have to say the Bashar Tootin at 39% owned is probably now the top back with the news that Tank Bixby has been traded. It was a good week for Travis Etienne. I expect Travis Etienne to be the starter going forward. He is playing for a contract, so he's got plenty of incentive, whether that's with the Jags or someone else. I think there's going to be plenty of opportunity for him. So Bashar Tootin definitely becomes the top waiver wire ad this week. With that in mind, there is some caution. I wouldn't go crazy on the fab. I think you can get him under the radar. If you can get him for 5 to 7% of your fab, that's probably a good ad. There's an opportunity he could take this job later on in the season, but there is a chance that it doesn't. So don't go all in. People might spend 10, 20% of fab. If they do, let them. But pricing force, don't let them go for under 5% fab. The next choice is here. My next favorite choice here is Kyle Monangai, 9% owned. We've seen what Ben Johnson likes to do. He likes to have 2 running backs here. And I think that Kyle Monangai has a pathway to success. Wasn't too enamored with Swift's performance. I think it was fine. The usage was good. Monangai was injured. He was hurt. He wasn't going to get a lot of play this week. I actually think Monangai has a pathway to getting a significant role with significant upside. So Monangai is my next bet. You can get him under the radar. I reckon you can get him for $1, maybe $2. And I would be trying to explore that option over some of these other ones. Next guys up in this position, Trey Benson, Dylan Sampson, they're 48 and 43% owned respectively. 2 different stories, but kind of cut from the same cloth. That Benson got a lot of usage. Connor was sort of rested a little bit in parts, and Benson looked pretty good. I think he's a very low-end, borderline flex play with handcuff ability. I wouldn't be going crazy on him. He's not a player that I'd be looking to add in a shallow league. In a deep league, he's probably already owned. So he's not a player I'm targeting, but I understand that some people do want to get in on him. If you want to get in, I wouldn't pay more than $2. I think that you could get into trouble here. I think someone is going to spend bigger on him and let them. I think there's better opportunities here for you. I just don't think there's a ceiling play there. Where I do think there's a ceiling play is Dylan Sampson. His usage was highly encouraging, especially in the receiving game. Now, we have to take it with a pinch of salt that Quinton Judkins wasn't involved. That means, therefore, he will be. He signed his contract. He will be with this team shortly. He was drafted to be the starter. But Jerome Ford looked bad. He looked really, really bad. And so there is a pathway for Sampson in the short term to be involved in the running game, but he looked really good in the receiving game. And there is an opportunity for him in this offense to actually get some production. Again, do I see a running back 2 role in fantasy football, top 24 starter ability? No, but I do think he's going to have spike weeks. And in PPR leagues, he is going to have some appeal. I'd be willing to put in 3-4% of fab. I don't think I'd go more than that. If people want to bid 5, 10, 15% of fab for Dylan Sampson, let them. I think better market opportunities are going to come along. And I don't think that Dylan Sampson is the end-all be-all, but I do think he is an attractive option on this week's waiver wire in particular. Other notable mentions, Ollie Gordon, Miles Sanders, Kenneth Gainwell, and Kareem Hunt. They're all for very different reasons. Ollie Gordon is a handcuff at 48% owned. I'm not spending anything more than $1 on him. Miles Sanders, the same. His usage was interesting. He broke off a couple of runs. But again, he's kind of a handcuff unless Javonte Williams gets hurt. He's not relevant. I wouldn't spend more than $1 on him. Kenneth Gainwell has gone really down, 2% owned, and now they've traded for Tank Bixby. That tells me everything I need to know, that I'm probably out of the Kenneth Gainwell business. And Kareem Hunt is always going to have a bit of interest and option. 19% owned. There could be this late season flurry that he has. He's going to have some bit of a role here, but I don't think he's a player that I'm actively looking to chase off the waiver wire this week. I'll probably stand pat where I am with a lot of players. Wide receiver is definitely the most interesting of all the positions this week. Well, with tight end's pretty good too. Marquise Brown is the hot ad this week after what's coming on. I would condition this with two things. One, I think Xavier Worthy could be back in the next week or two, and I think that's going to be really interesting to see what happens when he does. He's been listed as day-to-day. We haven't had any real news on the injury, but that says to me that he's probably not as bad as first feared, and that therefore he's likely to get more. He's likely to be back sooner rather than later. Does that decrease Marquise Hollywood Brown's role? Yes. What we do know is Marquise Hollywood Brown doesn't have a role really in this offense past week 6. When that happens, do you really want to spend that much fab? I think the fab on Marquise Brown is interesting. I think for the short-term production, he's worth 5% of fab. I think people will spend 10, 15% of fab, and I would say let them. I think that's good. Get the money out of the room. If you're in a traditional waiver claim league, then yeah, he's probably the top ad this week because he's going to give you instant gratification. But I'm not sure if he's my top ad, but he's one that definitely you don't want to let a rival get hold of because there is a few weeks of decent production coming here. Cedric Tillman is probably my top wide receiver ad this week. He's 35% owned. He's probably the player I'm most interested in. I think he's in a good offense. There's going to be plenty of ability for him. There is a worry that Howard Fanning Jr., will come to that in a second, might take away some targets, but I think ultimately I'm pretty impressed with Tillman's peripherals, and I think there's enough here for him to have a carved-out role for the rest of the season here as a wide receiver 2 on this team. In a high-powered offense that I think will put up good fantasy points through the season. Give me pieces of that are available. Cedric Tillman is probably my number 1 ad. Quentin Johnston is 9% owned and is going to be another hot waiver wire ad this week. Now, listen, he played a lot of snaps, but he was 3rd in targets per route run on his team. He was 3rd in actual snap share as well, with just 20 with target share, which is 20% of the team's targets. Lad McConkey still had the highest target share. They just couldn't find him. He did well in getting a lot of second read, third read passes, and I think he's going to be relatively decent in this offense. But I don't necessarily believe there is a top 36 upside in Quentin Johnston most weeks. I think people are going to pay a lot of money for it and be really disappointed with the lack of production. So I'm a little bit concerned. I'm willing to get him if he's available and there's not much else on the waiver wire. You know, a couple of percent of fab I'm fine with, but I'm probably, again, if you want to go up to 5, that's fine. I wouldn't, but if that's where you want to go, I think anything more than that, I think you're going to be grossly disappointed. I think there's going to be better targets. Again, I think this is probably going to be one of the worst waiver wires of the year. So I am going to stand pat in a lot of places and just pick up where I need to. Keishon Boutte is the next one, 2% owned. Really interesting ad here. Obviously broke 100 yards, so it's going to be fascinating and interesting to see what he does. But one thing I would say about Keishon Boutte here is that the New England Patriots led the league in passing rate over expected at 14.3% last week. So they're not going to pass as much as they have been. And with that pass production going down, those targets are going to get split out more. I don't think he is the main guy in this offense. I think there's going to be some weeks that he opts up with the most targets, and then it will be Diggs, and then it will be Douglas, and then it will be Williams. And I think ultimately none of these guys are overly married to being the guy. It's just a bunch of guys. And as a result of that, I just don't see a pathway for Boutte for long-term success. So I'm kind of out on it. If you can get him for $1 or $2, great. Anything more than that, I'm probably not interested. The guy I probably want in PPR formats over absolutely anybody is Wan'Dale Robinson. He is a cheat code, really, when it comes to PPR formats because he's getting the targets. He's going to get 8 to 10 targets a game. It looks like he yields those into catches, even if they're low volume. It's fine. As a flex play, he's going to do you just fine. There's a pathway to him getting 10 points every single week. There's not a lot of ceiling here. He kind of has to fall into the end zone to get anywhere near 20 points. But having said that, I still feel that there's an opportunity for Wan'Dale Robinson to get 10 to 12 to 14 points every week. 26% owned. He's worth that 2 to 3% fab that you can get him for. And I think he is a more exciting ad, although boring in a lot of ways, than Marquise Brown and Quentin Johnston and Keishon Boutte. I think they're the guys I'm not as in on as a Wan'Dale Robinson, who will get me where I need to get to. As those 1 week plays. No ceiling there. Don't want to go crazy, but for a couple of percent of fab, I'm in. Guys I'm not really interested on that you might find on other waiver wire shows or information. Adam Thielen, I don't think is a thing past week 3. Romeo Dobbs, again, they just spread the ball around loads. He kind of got the most usage, but I just think it's going to be a rough week for him. I think a rough season for him. I think he's going to have spike weeks, but I think a lot of flat weeks. I think it's Jaden Reed and Matthew Golden going forward, especially Jaden Reed in the short term, and I think it usurps more to Golden. I think there'll be spike weeks for Dubs, and I think he'll have weeks where he'll put up decent production. But I don't really want to play that game. Calvin Austin Jr. is interesting, 4% owned. I think you can get him for $1. And if so, I think there's a role there for him. I think he's third target behind DK Metcalf and Jonnu Smith, and so and then maybe the running backs. But I do think there's a role here. He was on the field a lot, high snap share, high sort of routes run on plays. So I think there's a lot of things there about Calvin Austin I do like from the peripheral perspective that don't quite translate to the box score, and I think that's okay. These are the kind of trends I love to look at. I'm not going crazy. I'm not cutting anyone drastic, but if I've got a free spot on my roster, I missed out on the top guys. Calvin Austin Jr. for an ad or $1 is fine. Josh Palmer could really usurp, but I'm not overly confident on him. 24% owned. I just think, again, they were massively over passing rate, over expected the Bills, and I don't expect that passing volume to go through every week. I think Keon Coleman is that guy moving forward for sure. Damari Douglas, I've already talked about. So again, I'm not really in on that offense. And Rashad Bateman, I think Rashad Bateman's going to have better weeks. 41% owned. I think there's something there for him. But again, I'm probably not adding him this week. I probably can get him next week unless I'm desperate and I've missed out on everyone. The tight end landscape is really interesting. Harold Fanning Jr. is the guy I want here. He's 3% owned. He got 20% target share in this offense. And I think he's going to line up in the slot. They're going to play with two tight ends. And I'm not saying that Njoku is then a bad ad because he's not. But I think Harold Fanning Jr. is definitely the most interesting to me. And he's one I'm going to want on a lot of teams. So he'll be my top waiver wire ad this week for sure. And the other tight end I want everywhere if I miss out on him is Juwan Johnson, 4% owned. I think these guys you can go up to sort of 3. I wouldn't be spending more than 3-4% of fab. And the reason why is the position doesn't allow it. It's going to be inconsistent and there's a lot of guys. So I think you're okay. Kind of like if someone wants to go mad, Fanning is the guy I would push the 5 on. Johnson, I don't think so, but I think there's a good carved out role for him. I mean, he was on the field 97% snaps. He missed 1. So I would sit here and say that there's a role for both of these players. And I think that's really good. And I think that worth 2-3 stretch to 4%. Fanning's the guy I might push to 5 if I think there's a lot of competition there, especially the person who has Kittle out or if I'm missing Kittle. I think outside of those circumstances, I'm sticking at 2 and 3. Let people waste the money on the tight end position. It's not worth it for you because you can go and get guys like Brenton Strange, 25% owned, who is going to do a job for the next few weeks. And we'll wait for the next player to usurp and come through. He's got a good schedule next few weeks, Brenton Strange. We can get locked in on him and feel okay about that. For sure. So I feel pretty good about having him as sort of the backup if I miss these first 2 options. Sorry. I just lost my page. And then I would have with him, if I missed out on him, then Jonnu Smith, I've talked about 41%. He's going to be a high target ad in this offense. So he's a player I'm interested in. For sure. And if I miss out on him as well, then there's a few more places I'm looking. I've just lost my place. I'm so sorry. So Jonnu Smith and then Michael Mayer. If Brock Bowers is hurt, I don't think he is. But Noah Fant might be the interesting ad here. 3% owned. He's the guy with a decent target share, over 30% owned. He's a player I'm probably going to get in on if I miss out on those top 3 targets. I think there's a role and I want cheap pieces of this Cincinnati offense. He's going to go under the radar because Cincinnati weren't very good, but it looks like he's going to usurp Mike Gesicki. He got decent amount of targets. He's going to be 3rd choice in this offense, maybe 4th behind Chase Brown. But if I can't get Fanning, and the order I go is Fanning, Johnson at $3-4, then the next ones to be going at is Brenton Strange. If I don't get him, then Jonnu Smith or Noah Fant, and they're kind of way. And if you can't get any of them, Mason Taylor is probably the next guy you want to get. Some deep stats before I get onto the defenses. There's a couple of guys I've already talked about. Already, the guys I'd be looking at in a really deep league is Juju Smith-Schuster. He's less than 1% owned. They're just really struggling. Someone's going to need to get the ball, and therefore Juju Smith-Schuster is going to be one for sure. Harold Fanning is going to be available in most leagues, and some of the other guys with low percentages I've talked about. You might want to look at Jake Tongs. He is the tight end behind George Kittle. They don't have a tight end. Juwan Jennings has got a shoulder injury. He might miss time. Pearsall was great, but you need more than one target. So Jake Tongs caught a touchdown. So as a result, I'm probably going to be there and grab Tongs. I think there's going to be a route to him being somewhat as a short-term play, reasonably successful. Looking at DSTs to stream, Seattle is probably my pick. The next 3 weeks, they got Pittsburgh, New Orleans, and Arizona. That looks pretty good to me. You can get them for, I wouldn't spend more than $1 on these guys, but that's where I'll be going. San Francisco 49ers, they're 31% owned. Again, they have New Orleans, Arizona, and Jacksonville. The Patriots, they have Miami, Pittsburgh, Carolina. You can get them for $0. I'd be adding them. The Rams are 22% owned. They have Tennessee, Philadelphia. I think as well, you could probably look at the Cowboys. They haven't got a bad schedule as well with the Giants, Chicago, and Green Bay. So there's some good options to stream. I wouldn't spend more than $1 usually on them, but you can spend $1 if you need to. I try and keep the fab. Again, I stress this, it's not a good waiver wire week. The other things I would say, just looking at it, we kind of knew what we knew. There isn't a lot of flux or change this week, so don't panic. Stay the course. If you had a bad week, that's fine. That happens. Stick your process in. Keep following it. But there are some top ads you can add here. But I would say overall, it's a pretty bad week. I think next week's will be better. I think you'll start to see a few more injuries. You'll start to see a few more things play out a little bit more. We'll start to have some further trends. Don't panic. This is one of the worst waiver wire weeks I've seen in a while. So just stay the course. Spend where you have to. Don't spend if you can afford not to spend. If you've got to win, maybe don't add anything more to your roster unless it's a Harold Fanning Jr. or someone who could have a season-long contribution, because outside of that, I think you're just going to be wasting fab. And you want to wait that fab until you've got really good opportunities going forward. So place some $0 bids if you want to freshen up, but don't go spending money. I would hold on as long as possible if you can. I would say as well, check out the links below. I talked about the Patreon already. Hit that up. Loads of great stats. We're going to talk strategy, roster construction, when to rotate your roster, when to have running backs on your roster, when to have wide receivers on your roster in terms of the bench, when to bring in your extra quarterback and extra DS and extra tight ends, etc. Who to have on your bench, who not to have on your bench. We're doing a lot of that over the next few weeks, as well as monitoring touch rates and monitoring the stats and monitoring trends and picking up players before they become breakout stars. So we're going to be doing a lot of that on the Patreon. Hit that up, $1, $3 a month. We're going to be dropping some stuff on Discord. All my ranks are there. Some bits and pieces are going to be on there. I'm just going to post as and when I can. I highlighted wide receiver, cornerback matchups. I usually do a column every year. I don't have a column this year, so I'm going to be posting sort of the top ads there and the ones to avoid. That was pretty fruitful 70% of the time last week. And we avoided some big landmines and we picked up some pretty big gains as a result of that. There's also the Ask Murf channel. So I will be taking some questions in there, some players to some success there. I was saying start Michael Pittman, and that worked out to be pretty well for some people. I'm not going to get everything right. Don't come at me. Don't at me. But, I will try and talk through process and try and help people. So utilize that part of the Discord as well. I think as a Patreon, but Discord. Join the Discord. The link is there. Everything you need for the season is there. Also, don't forget, we got our NFL show. That is going live tonight with Joel and the gang. Make sure you give them plenty of love, plenty of support. They're doing a phenomenal job. They're bringing the fun to Tuesdays, talking all things NFL. So give them a lot of love because they're doing a phenomenal job. That's going to do it for this Waiver Wire podcast. It's slightly shorter than the last one, which is good. I think it's better content as well and more actual advice for you. So I'm almost glad the audio didn't work. We will be back, Danny and I, on Thursday. We'll see where Stocks is at, and hopefully Stocks can join us. But if not, I know that he appreciates all the thoughts and give him lots of love and respect when he does return back to the channel, because he is an incredible dude and he is just going through a lot of things at the moment. It's a bit of a struggle. So a lot of love, Stocks. We love you. But Danny and I will be back next week. Back on Thursday. So enjoy that. But until then, Rush Nation, don't forget, as always, keep rushing.